Hello there, listeners to the Bylines Network podcast. Screaming into the void, but this time with friends. It's cheaper than therapy. I'm Julian in Bristol.
I'm Chris in London.
Hi, I'm Yvonne from the Northeast.
So, as regular listeners of the podcast will know, we celebrated both Yorkshire Byline's 5th birthday and the Bylines Network 5th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and that made me realise that we actually have a lot more publications that will be celebrating their 5th birthday soon. So we're just going to go through all of them on all of their birthdays, starting with the very prestigious Northeast Bylines with its editor-in-chief, Yvonne. Yvonne, how are you?
Hi, good to be here.
So how long have you been editor-in-chief of the Northeast?
I've been editor for 5 years since we started.
Oh, wow.
In July 2020. Yeah, and it feels like it's gone super quickly. It does not feel like 5 years. It's been a really good 5 years.
What led you to get involved, and what led you into the Bylines network?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think I first heard about it through, I think it would be a Facebook post or a social media post from Mike Goldsworthy, just talking about the idea of a kind of a Bylines, regional Bylines kind of network or idea. It was very early days, and I think that maybe Yorkshire had just started when I became aware of it. I'm not certain. Maybe they hadn't even started yet. And I think Mike just said, if you're interested, give me a ring. And so I just thought, oh yeah, I'll find out about this. Gave Mike a ring, and then it kind of went from there. Mike put me in touch with Louise from Yorkshire, and I had a meeting with her, and it all sounded absolutely brilliant. And so what I did was just to get in touch with a few people in the Northeast that I thought might be interested. We had about 2 meetings, I think, had a chat about it. There was a lot of enthusiasm. And at that stage, we didn't have an editor. And I at that point thought my role was more in a kind of organizational way. And so getting people together and all of that kind of stuff, which I did. And then suddenly found that I was being the editor as well. So then it all kind of started from there.
You got roped into being editor, I guess.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned it started in July 2020, and I just wonder what kind of stories were you getting at that time? I mean, obviously we were sort of in the middle of COVID and topsy-turvy.
That's a really good question. We started very, very small. We only had, I think, for our first, we used to publish in issues or editions, and so we kind of got a new front page each week and so on. And I remember the first week we had, I think it was 10 articles, which were just whatever came in that week. And there were things like, what I remember was they were quite related to Brexit and the pro-European stuff. There was quite a bit of that kind of stuff. I think there was one piece about a local radio show. It was just a mix of things that people, felt that they had and they wanted to write about at that stage. So it started very small. At that point, we only published maybe one article a day, or maybe not even as much as that. And I remember Louise saying to me, "Oh, we're publishing 3 articles a day," and thought, "No way, we'll never do that." And then now we do that, and we're more than that quite often. So it does actually happen. But at the time, I remember feeling quite nervous. Can we really do that?
What makes you think that the Northeast was such an easy target to be the second publication? Because with Yorkshire and with West Country, eventually West Country Voices, there's like a very strong central identity with both of those places. But with at least for me, someone who lives on quite literally the other side of the country to the Northeast in the Southwest, there isn't really that kind of like central identity unless you're counting like Tuners in Newcastle. So what makes you think that Northeast was like an easy target for Bylines?
Yeah, well, the Northeast is actually very cohesive. So if you're from the Northeast, you're very proud to say that you're from the Northeast. It's really important to us. Now, of course, you've just mentioned football there. Of course, we have football rivalry, particularly between Newcastle fans and Sunderland fans. And I certainly grew up with that. And I had some friends I was from Newcastle. I am from Newcastle. I have friends who are Sunderland fans. and there was always that kind of banter, that rivalry and so on. But the minute someone from outside criticises you in the Northeast, you suddenly band together, and there's a massively strong identity there. So it is really very strong, and it's quite a big area, and it's quite varied, and we have quite a rich history. I think we have quite an industrial history. We had a lot of coal mines and so on. Of course, we had a lot of engineering stuff, the railways and all of that. And we also have in Northumberland quite a rural area as well. So it is quite mixed. But yes, we do feel very much a part of the Northeast, and it's really important to us, whichever part of it we're from.
Very much reminds me of cities where it's just like, at least in my experience in London and in Bristol, where it's just like, oh yeah, no, these places are rubbish, like at all. But as soon as someone criticizes either Bristol or London, it's just like, you come here, say it to my
exactly,
face.
Exactly, yes, right.
It is like that in London. It absolutely is like that in London. I'm from North London. Anyone, like people from South London, talk rubbish about North London and vice versa. But the moment someone comes for London, like, right, we're all hearing this.
Like I do every day in our group chats.
I mean, what for you? So you've been going for 5 years at Northeast Bylines. Are there any moments out of those 5 years that really stand out for you that either as particular highlights or challenges?
I would say there's almost too much to mention. It's been a really fantastic 5 years, and I think it's going to continue to be another however long, as we go forward. It's been really, really great things have happened. For me, the thing that stands out is perhaps not one event, but it's the experience of working together with so many fantastic writers. We have the most wonderful team. And for me personally, that's probably the absolute highlight of doing what I do in my role as editor. It's meeting people that some I knew before, most I didn't know before, and working with writers and seeing them grow from maybe starting the very first time they write something into becoming regular writers and kind of growing in confidence and all of that. Having said that, we do have, I'm now going off your question, but I'll just keep going. I think we do have a range of writers. We have some really experienced writers. We've had a small number who that's their background in terms of their job. They've had a professional experience of being a journalist. Then we have some who have never written before, and it's the first time they've written something and suddenly discover that they do have a voice. And it's just that's for me perhaps one of the most exciting things about it of all. It's helping people to find their voice and help and encouraging them to write.
So what specifically do you think is, or at least what series of articles do you think are like ones that you're particularly proud of? Or
again, fantastic question, and there is so much comes to mind there. One area that we've done a lot on is pieces around stuff that's going on in the Tees Valley, so stuff around Ben Houghton, the mayor there, and various stories around that. And there's been lots and lots of writing on that subject area. But that's only one area. It's really hard to say. We also publish, as well as the sort of local politics and local news stuff, we also publish quite a lot of arts articles. So we've had quite a lot of theatre reviews, book reviews, film reviews, and I actually love all of those as well. I don't know that I even really want to highlight one series or one type of article, because what I really love is that we have such a range, such a variety of different pieces and different local voices.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, Yvonne, is specifically about the Northeast. What aspects of, because like Jules said, I mean, most people outside of the Northeast would think of it as just this sort of blob there. It's not that, we know it's made up of different cities, but people think the Northeast, they just think that's just the area up there. They don't think of the individual stories, towns, the sort of different backgrounds and upbringings that people have. And I mean, what apart from that, what kind of stories and aspects of the Northeast do you think aren't really represented so much, especially in sort of national media already, because it's not an area that's talked about so much anymore?
I think that the Northeast has been ignored and forgotten by national media by and large. Not always, of course, it comes up every now and then. So we had a story, as you'd be aware of, in the last few months, where very sadly the tree at Sycamore Gap was cut down and there was a court case and so on. And that was really horrible. And that story really touched, I think it actually touched people in the entire world, actually. That was not just a local story, but it really had a massive effect on people in the Northeast. So that's one thing that kind of comes to mind there. But I think in terms of the media and reporting about the region, I think we have often been forgotten. And something that comes through a lot in the writing of a number of our writers is that the parts of the area, not maybe the whole area, but certainly large parts of the area, have fallen into this kind of left behind regions, which came out very strongly, of course, in things like the Brexit vote and in the recent, I don't even know if you want to mention it, but in the recent council elections and I think we're still reeling in the Northeast. Some of us are still reeling that the County Durham now has a reform control council, and things like that are a real worry. But I think there is a really strong feeling that the Northeast has got one of the highest levels of poverty in the country, has some really serious problems, not in the whole area, of course, it's mixed like anywhere else, but there are some issues that do need to be addressed, need to be fixed. We've written a lot about some of those issues.
You touched on a really important point from the sounds of things. I mean, you mentioned that not the media sort of don't cover a lot in the Northeast, but I mean, it sounds like the two major parties that have, the Northeast has been dominated by Labour for God knows how long, especially in Durham. I know that was a big shock to MPs from that area. That I mean, we're feeling comfortable. And I mean, it just goes to show people up there just feel left behind, not just by but also their own politicians. And I mean, I suppose for you being from that region, where do you think, I know the next election's a long way away, but where do you think that will translate?
Yeah, that is that's a big question, isn't it? Well, I know what I would like to happen. I actually at the moment really don't know. I think there are voters who have traditionally supported Labour who are struggling at the moment, and sadly, I don't know how many of those people really have gone with the Reform vote. We're told that. I'm not sure that I completely believe that. I think Reform has picked up Tory votes in the area. They probably, sadly, have picked up some Labour votes as well, which to me makes no sense whatsoever, but that seemed to be the case. I'd like to think that the current Labour government will regain some ground. I think Labour has made some mistakes and need to get that sorted so that people who have traditionally voted Labour will begin to trust them again. And we'll see the Labour Party stick into their roots, if you like, where the things that they actually stand for. So hopefully that will change before the next election. I mean, we do have having said all of that, we have some great Labour MPs in the area. So, we'll just have to wait and see. Don't know, but we definitely have our part to play in that with the Bylines network. So,
focusing a little bit on like the area that you cover. So you cover County Durham, Northumberland, Teesside, which I believe is Middlesbrough and surrounding areas.
Yes, it is, Teesside.
Tyneside, which is Newcastle and Sunderland and surrounding areas, and Wearside, which I'm not entirely sure what that is.
So Tyneside is the area. It's the area along the banks of the Tyne. So Newcastle is kind of the main town there. Wearside is basically Sunderland and surrounding areas. So along Bad River Wear. So yeah.
So how do you try and avoid what decades of governments have done and try not to like leave behind certain areas in favor of like the major metropolitan urban areas like Newcastle and Sunderland and Middlesbrough and all that, where stuff happens a lot more frequently that might be more newsworthy?
Yeah. We try and cover as much as we can. I mean, we are volunteer run, so we are dependent on our availability of our volunteers. We cover the area quite well on the whole. We do, of course, have a number of articles that are Newcastle based. We have a number of articles that are Sunderland and Teesside and so on, Northumberland. The areas that could get missed are some of the smaller towns in the area and some of the rural areas. But we do have some writers. So, for example, we've got one young writer who lives in right up in Berwick, so right in the very north of Northumberland. So we do have some pieces based around that area, which has very different needs from, say, Newcastle. It's not, it's much kind of smaller, and has missed out on some government funding and so on that perhaps a bigger city like Newcastle perhaps does better out of. But we do try to have writers in the whole of the region, and we do cover it fairly well. So we can also make some use of the local democracy reporting service piece, and that's quite helpful as well. So we tend to each week kind of scan what's available there, just to make sure if there are really hyper local stories that we think we'd like to highlight, we can use some of that material as well, which is really helpful, really useful.
And kind of just following up from that question, the local democracy reporting is really important. I don't think people talk about it, to be honest. Are there any stories that particularly stand out for you over the last 5 years that sort of that are right? That if you go, oh right, I'll think of a story and it's the first one that comes to your head. Are there any particular ones?
Right, give me a moment. There's so much there. Yes, I'm going to go for one story. It's been an ongoing story, which is it's the Immigration Removal Centre at Derwentsside, which is what used to be called Hassockfield.
Mm-hmm.
And we've followed quite a lot of what a particular group a campaign group has been doing in that area. They started off, well, they are still called the No to Hassockfield campaign. The centre actually changed its name, so it's actually called Derwentsside. And this is a group of human rights campaigners. They're just ordinary people who feel really strongly that place shouldn't even exist, and that we should not be, as a country, should not be incarcerating vulnerable women in that place, who are not criminals. There are various reasons, where they don't have the right paperwork or whatever it is, and have ended up locked up in that place. And we've followed quite a lot of what that group has done. Recently, there was a woman who was there who was about to be deported, and the group did quite a lot to stop that happening. Obviously, there was also a legal team doing a lot of work with a woman who'd been in the UK for a number of years and was very settled here, and so on and so on. And actually, as far as we know, that deportation has actually been stopped, we believe, at the moment, and hopefully. So that's one story. I mean, it's kind of an ongoing story, but it is kind of something that's really important in our area, and that is that's in County Durham.
In the nicest way I can put this question, is there anything you look back on and think, oh, I could have like done that a little better. I could have like pursued like this line a little better.
Yes, there always is. Yeah, I think we're all quite hypercritical of what we do, and there are ongoing challenges. I can't think of an example just right now. Actually, having said that, yeah, I think we're always very critical of what we do, and we want to kind of improve on what we do all of the time. We learn a lot as we go. I mean, apart from anything else, I feel we've learned quite a lot about some other kind of practical, in a way, quite boring stuff, like how do you deal with, I don't know, copyright on images, that kind of thing. Okay, that's a really different thing from a big story there, but.
And I mean, looking back on the last 5 years, I mean, reflected on a few points that and the proud moments that you've had and highlights of the Northeast Bylines network. What do you think? Where do you see Northeast Bylines in the next 5 years? Where do you think it's headed?
Yeah.
What do you want to see as the editor?
I want to increase our diversity of writers, so that we're hearing more of a range of voices from the region. So I think that's something that we really do want to do something more with. I would kind of mention in that actually something that we're already doing, but I'd like to do more of, which is our student writers. At the moment, we have students doing placements with us from, I think, 4 of the region's universities. So have students from Teesside, from Sunderland, from Newcastle, and from Northumbria universities who do work with us. And I'd like to do more of that. I'd like to get Durham University involved in that as well, if we can. And that's one area. But just generally to have a kind of a wide area group of people, range of people. We'd like to get more young people, just a more diverse group. I'd like to see more of that. And I'd like us to be much, much, much more. I was going to say a voice for the region, but actually I don't really mean that. I mean a range of voices for the region, because we're not all the same. And I think that's important to remember. That's what I'd really like to do more of. Just get more, just hear more voices. And, and do, I think we're already doing this, but to do more of the accurate and honest reporting, do that kind of truth to power thing as citizen journalists. So just more and more of that, I think.
So, last question from me, I think. What story, either like locally or nationally or internationally even, do you kind of look like, and you're like kind of worried about? Like, do you look over in America and you're worried about like what's going to happen over there? Do you look at like the ever encroaching rise of AI and wonder if that's going to replace anybody?
Actually, you mentioned America. We've just recently started to publish some pieces. We've actually published 3 so far, pieces by American writers. And we did reach out a while back to, just on social media, reached out to our friends in America and said, anyone want to write for us? And then we didn't really get much take up from that. But then Mike did a call out for American writers to come and write for us. And so we've actually now got a few, which is great. And I would like to do as much of that as we can, because I think there are, well, as we've seen, just in very small way, from our interactions with American writers and writing for us in the Northeast. Funnily enough, we've got writers actually who are from the Northeast part of the USA, which is just kind of, that happened by chance, but I really like that little connection there. But there are Americans we know who are quite scared of what's going on in America, and it's giving a very small number of people, at least possibly, the chance to say what they really want to say and have their voices heard. I think that is important. Yeah, I do worry about America. I do worry about the rise of the far right throughout Europe and the world. I worry about, what else I worry about? Yeah, AI, interesting. I don't know about AI. I guess there are lots of positives. I think there must be, but it does scare me a bit. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the American writers. I mean, lead up to us meeting today, I read an article that was published by Melanie Wolf, with some concerns that she wrote about her son and the way that America's treating transgender people at the moment, and it was, I mean, if you haven't read that piece, I would strongly recommend giving it a read, because it's incredibly powerful. And I mean, we did talk with Louise when we spoke to her, Jules, if I'm not mistaken, about where does she think the Byline networks will extend, and it looks like Northeast have already gone across the pond.
It's been really interesting, and I've actually felt quite humbled by getting to meet these American writers, just really very briefly in a very small way, just with one article from each of the 3 of them. But it's been really lovely to just have that contact. and hear what they're actually saying.
And it's a bit of a warning for us as well, looking at what's going on over there, and like that should be a massive red flag and alarm bells ringing.
Yeah.
For all of us, we should see where we could be headed, and we should do everything.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Yvonne. Congratulations on 5 years at Northeast Bylines.
Thank you.
Here's to 5 more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us, listeners. I've been Julian in Bristol.
I've been Chris in London.
And Yvonne in Newcastle.